Joe talks about Joe. And now, your host, Joe Slepsky.
Hello again, everybody. It's me, your host, Joe Slepsky, and welcome back to Joe on Joe. This is the only G.I. Joe podcast where I've covered every episode of the Sunbelt cartoon, the DIC, and even G.I. Joe Extreme, and every issue of the Marvel Real American Hero comic book, page by page, panel by panel. And that's important today because today we're going to talk a little bit about the Skybound G.I. Joe universe, just a little bit, before we get into our main subject of today's episode, which is, of course, You on Joe, and our friend Carson Mataxis, who joins us today to talk about the amazing 3D Joe's Omnibus that recently arrived at our homes with a forklift. And you know what what You on Joe is all about. It is you, the listener. You guys are the star. If there's anything about G.I. Joe that you want to talk about, albeit a person, a character, a creator, a comic book, an episode of the show, an arc of the show, an arc of the whatever, man. If it's G.I. Joe adjacent, I want to get you on, and I want to hear why that drives your passion. What about that really caught your eye? Maybe when a kid, like it's the thing that got you into it. I love it. Next week, we've got another great one coming up. You'll see when it drops next week. And it's literally the reason why I love doing You on Joe's. So if you want to be a guest, please reach out to me. You can find me on social media at Joe on Joe Pod. That's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I will always call it Twitter. I'm sorry. You can also send me an email to joeandjoepod@gmail.com and say hello. If you're on your phones and you're subscribing to your podcasts, there's usually a rate and review button there. Why don't you give me a rate and review and tell the world that you like this show, because more people will find it then. And then if you're still like, I still want to support the Joe and Joe podcast, it's still just not enough, you can go to patreon.com and sign up for patreon.com/Joe and Joe Pod and sign up to be a Patreon. There's multiple levels of support, and you get full access to the entire library of Joe on Joe. And yeah, so it's great. I really appreciate the support. And who really appreciates your support is our wonderful sponsors, the Movies and a Meal podcast. In the beginning of time, the smallest organism gained sentience and thought to itself, I really need a good meal. Then a bunch of other stuff happened, and finally the Lumiere brothers started showing movies in France. This was all the inspiration that fellow broadcasters Brad, Keith, and Ben needed to combine these two primal needs into the Movies and a Meal podcast. The Movies and a Meal is one of the most casual and relaxing film talk podcasts you could ever listen to. These three friends enjoy a good meal together while talking all about the movies. And not just reviews. They do favorite lists, comparison discussions, genre talks, anything and everything that you can think of. They've even broken their solemn promise inherent in the name and branched out into TV talk. So I love the variety of films they bring to the table. They cover new releases, classics, cult films, often in one episode. It's really a delight to listen to, and it has something for every movie fan out there to enjoy. So if you're looking to grow your podcast library, if you eat meals, and if you've ever seen a movie, then you should give Ben, Keith, and Brad a listen and subscribe to the Movies and a Meal podcast. They've been a great sponsor to this show. I love the Movies and a Meal podcast, and I'd like all of you to love them too. It's Oscar season, gang, so I'm sure they have a lot to talk about, and we've got a lot to talk about today. So before we get into this week's awesome interview with Carson, I really had a great time talking to him. I promised a little bit on Twitter to talk about the biggest controversy to hit G.I. Joe since Cobra La, and it's about Cobra La. We're talking about Cobra Commander #1 from Skybound. Now, this show, Joe on Joe, we don't normally do like current issue reviews. It's not a thing I do. I don't like doing it. There have been a couple exceptions. You can go back and revisit in the archives my Snake Eyes Dead Game thoughts, and I think you'll see why I took an exception with that series. And we did Saturday Morning too, which I thought was a lot of fun. But for the most part, I don't like getting into modern reviews for a few reasons. I like stories to marinate a little bit. I also like this about my movies too. I like movies to marinate a little bit. I like stories to marinate, to sit in the zeitgeist, to sit in your belly. Is that a story that resonated with me as a G.I. Joe fan? Is it something that really worked in the long run? And maybe it's because of the immediacy of social media and podcasts and things like that, of letting creators create and letting them do their thing. And so you won't really see like weekly reviews of Duke or Cobra Commander or a Real American Hero series. Although I will just drop it. I'm enjoying all three so far. I think they're doing a bang up job with them. But you won't see those on the show. Occasionally, if something crazy happens, we'll mention it. But and this isn't going to be a real review per se. This is going to be some top notes because I can see already online that it is splitting the community. So I'm hoping my thoughts here help unify, help change some minds, help open some horizons, or seal the deal and go, no, man, I totally disagree, and I don't like what they're doing there. Because I will just say up top, I kind of like it. I like what they're doing with Cobra Commander. It's only been one issue, but from what I can see, I'm in, man. Enshrining Cobra La into the comic book version of Cobra Commander, into this universe's version of Cobra Commander. I think it's great. It makes Golobulus and his entire crew a real thing in that universe, a real force. And a lot of people blanch at that. A lot of people think it's silly and dumb. And it's the reason a lot of us stopped collecting Joes back in the day. It was a big reason why I stopped collecting Joes. I remember looking at that 3-pack on the pegs and going, that's really stupid. But times have changed and circumstances have changed. And, they're building this universe where, giant transforming cars exist in this universe from the ground up. It's not like when G.I. Joe Transformers crossed over in the 80s with Marvel, it was a forced kind of thing. And then that was it. They didn't talk about it for a while. And then they showed up again, This is from the ground up. They're building this universe where giant Transformers cars, floating quintessons, all the craziness that's going on in Void Rivals. So in that world where everyone else gets a crazy thing, why not Cobra La? Where's G.I. Joe's crazy thing? A very smart comic book publisher once told me in a conversation, we were talking about 2 books that absolutely had the same audience. I won't go into the details of who and what it was, but they were 100% the same audience. And I told him how much I loved the one, and I was upset that it was going away. And the other one I enjoyed too quite a bit, but I really wanted them both to live. And he shared that normal comic books don't sell. Comic books that don't have a crazy, crazy hook to it. And I'd never thought about it in that way, because I was a G.I. Joe fan. And G.I. Joe traditionally had some craziness, but it was relatively grounded. And we've all read grounded books, But he's right. He's 100% right. The books that stick around, the books that have real lasting staying power, tend to have a crazy element to it. And then I got thinking, well, what does Real American Hero have to it? Well, it had ninjas. And in the 80s, ninjas were still new. Remember, there's nothing bigger than ninjas in the 80s. So throwing that crazy element of a super bad ninja in there, and some of the craziness of Cobra, even though it was a lot more grounded in the comic book than it was on the TV show. But ninjas were your crazy in the original G.I. Joe. So now, fast forward to now, ninjas aren't crazy anymore. That's not a draw. That's not a thing that's going to keep bringing people back. So what is it? What about this relaunch of this universe that can add a little bit of that spectacle, a little bit of that kookiness to it? And if it's going to be Cobra La and just that whole concept, I'm in. Because if it remains Transformers and is just the Transformers, then your core concept of G.I. Joe is relying on another toy property entirely. It's relying entirely on Transformers. But in this case, you're giving the bad guys this crazy Cobra La origin that's going to drive the G.I. Joe series, and you have some Transformers tech along the way. I think it's a smart move. I think it's also a why not, And if you think about it, this is the origin that more people know. Possibly, I imagine, if you looked at the actual numbers, more people saw the Rise of Cobra. But I do recall there's a lot of people at the time of Rise of Cobra when you quote-unquote saw the origin of Cobra Commander. There was a pretty vocal backlash of people going, that's not the real origin of Cobra Commander. So I don't think there's a lot of people that have that stuck in their head. But so many people saw the origin of Cobra Commander being Cobra La, then they understood that he was a used car salesman. We did because we read it, and and yes, I know a lot of people read the G.I. Joe comic book back in the day, but you remember things that are illustrated and shown you, it just burns in your head more. And to this day, people will absolutely think, oh, he came from Cobra, and then you're a comic book fan and you have to jump in and go, well, technically that's just, so why not, why not do it? Like, why not just lean into that and then take that crazy idea and make it your own, and treat it seriously. It's Ed Brubaker taking the idea of, man, what if Bucky lived, which probably everyone pitched for 40 years. And Ed Brubaker going, well, no, here's how Bucky lived. So we got this idea of, what if there was a separate society that worshipped organic things, and what would that be like? So I'm in. I think it's fun. Also, they a couple notes on it. I loved they used the V4 uniform with the red face mech. I have always disliked that action figure quite a bit. I think the mold is weird. I don't like he's got weird roundness in weird places. But when you use that in that world and show that that's just a look that he has, and it's got this kind of real organic vibe to it, I think it totally fits. There's also a nod to his Rise of Cobra origins. He gets caught in a giant bomb blast and he's healed up. That's what Cobra Origins was. He was a normal dude, and what's his name from Third Rock from the Sun? And, he gets caught in a bomb blast and he comes out and he's Cobra Commander now and he's angry. They even did a close-up that there's one of those panels is a close-up of his eye, and just the way he's bandaged, that's what the Cobra Commander was. You only saw his eye for most of that movie. Which again, not supporting that choice. It was... there were so many better things they could have done with the Cobra Commander in that movie, but it's there. They did it. And I do think this was a purposeful inclusion in the comic book. I love that little grotesque extra eyeball they gave him, like he's starting to grow those. I love the no retreat stuff, and they talk about that in the Williamson talks about that in the post issue write up, that they're drawing a line in the sand. This is a different Cobra Commander. I like the art quite a bit. I think it works really well for the organic stuff. It is so I wrote this out. So I think the opening half of the book in Cobra La, I think it could have used a bit of an omniscient narrator to kind of explain and flesh out what exactly was going on. This art style is gorgeous and it looks great, but it's a lot less detailed. And it's a little more impressionistic, and sometimes it can use a helping hand with the written word. But we live in a time where it's minimalism on the written word, right? And there's less use of the omniscient narrator than ever before. So a lot of modern books run into this problem where they defer to the artwork, and they're like, we're just going to let the artwork tell the story. I think this could have used a little bit more in the front, like because you're introducing this entire new civilization. I didn't understand that was actually a revolution going on. There were enough cues that somehow he was, and I get it. You have a reveal at the end of what he's working on, but it was real. It was too ill-defined, I think, to be enjoyable, because as someone who you're familiar with Cobra La, you have some preconceived notions. So you're seeing it, but you're trying to translate that into what you're seeing on the page. And you're like, well, are these people transformed? Are they, where's Nemesis Enforcer? Where's, Pythona? All that stuff. Like you're looking for certain things. So I think it needed a little bit more hand-holding. Not saying it was confusing. It just, I don't think it was as clear as it needed to be. And then at the end of the book, is that really supposed to be Grunt? Really like Robert Graves Grunt? If so, why does he look just like rock and roll? That makes me think that there's some things got crossed in the production. Like someone told them it was supposed to be rock and roll, and then they called him Grunt, and they made the change at the last minute, like via text, like in the script or something like that. And they never changed it. Something there is weird. And I mean that from a kind of a, 300 foot in the air view of it. Like you drew rock and roll, the traditional look of rock and roll. And if that's what Grunt's going to look like, I don't get it. Like, you have characters that look a certain way, and as far as like their design, not necessarily the execution of the design, but the design itself. So yeah, that was weird. That was weird. Plus, I'm just saying, I always like my Grunt to look like Michael Ironside. I think that's great, and I would love for an opportunity to see that. But yeah, that is weird. So you see that and you expect rock and roll, and then he calls him Grunt. And since Grunt is also just kind of a generic name, however, setting the visual aside of it, that's kind of cool because that hints that Cobra Commander may have these connections to the U.S. government, which is another thing they did right in this book, because that leaves room for Cobra Commander to have once been a normal dude with connections in the real world, and then he joins Cobra La, and then he becomes the Cobra Commander, etc., and so on and so forth. So I think there's a lot there for future unpacking of storylines. So I'm in. It's not really a full review, like I said, but if you're doing an alt version of G.I. Joe, it needs to be an alt version of G.I. Joe. There's no reason to do anything that is within 90 degrees of Hama's Real American Hero. There's just no reason to do it. So why not this? This is great. This was fun. Like my hope is that it opens them up to using more Sunbow related stuff, because G.I. Joe's got that rich, really rich animated history that is untapped. When they did the Saturday Morning Adventure stuff, that was like the first hint that G.I. Joe even had a cartoon in forever, like ever, so you've got all the Sunbow episodes, you've got all the DIC episodes, you've got Extreme, these are all rich places that had all these fun stories with all these gimmicks and various characters. Why not use them? And they'd be shoehorned into the Hamaverse at this point. Hamaverse is its own established thing. So why not use all that craziness? And it feels like that's what they're doing with Skybound. And if so, I'm on board, man. So, a little long-winded rant, but that's my thoughts. I'm in for it. Yeah, I'm excited. So now onto the show. You all know my guest this week, or rather you should know him, because it is Carson Mataxis, the proprietor of 3djoes.com. And more importantly to today's conversation, he is the driving force behind collecting the Art of G.I. Joe, the Omnibus Hardcover. Today you're going to hear me absolutely gush on, it's crazy, on how much I love this project, how much I love this book. It is awesome. So get ready for an absolute praise fest, and it is well deserved. This massive tome, it is an impressive product. It's over 700 pages. It's oversized. It weighs 18 pounds. It is a complete monster of a book. I hope all of you listeners get your own copy of it. Go to 3djoes.com. There's plenty of links on there, plenty of ways to get it. It is only $150. It is an absolute steal. Carson talks on the show about like the print run. He only has a few thousand left, and I know you're like, oh, that sounds like a lot, but that is not a lot. That's all he has. It was such a feat to get this thing printed. That's all they're going to make. So get over there and get it. They've also got that sweet DVD Blu-ray set of like all the behind the scenes interviews and stuff, which is pretty cool. But this book is the cornerstone, man. You got to get your hands on it. So listen to this podcast, enjoy it. I hope it sells you on it. And I am getting no cut of anything. I really, really just like this as a fan. It is great. So I hope everyone gets it, because everyone deserves to get it. If you're a G.I. Joe fan, you deserve to treat yourself to this. And I mean that genuinely. Like, it is the cost of a handful of new classified figures. You're getting the artwork of everything that we ever loved, and the reason you're even listening to this podcast. So I hope you guys all enjoyed the talk as much as I did having it. And I think that comes through here. So now let's go catch up with Carson Mataxis talking about the Art of G.I. Joe.
Well, and then you look at it like that's a stepping stone that got you to where you are now. Mm-hmm. If you didn't take those steps, you wouldn't be at the level you are now.
Yeah, exactly. So. And you take pride in that, and you certainly should take pride in the in the Art of G.I. Joe Omnibus Hardcover, man. I mean, I have the soft covers as well, and at first, my brain, my collector / there's only so much space in my world brain goes, well, maybe then I could either, sell those other ones, or I could just, or rather, I'm like, I'll use the old ones as reference, and then I started going through the Art of G.I. Joe, the hardcover, the new Omnibus, man, and I'm like, what it's such a step up. It's not, and that's no slag on the originals,
Sure,
but it is
of course.
just such a nice nice piece of art that you've put together of other people's artwork that I'm like, using any other, like an old reference, but it's just not the same. It's just not the same.
The only thing, that is still notable to me about the soft covers that I still really enjoy is the two-part clamshell case
I love it.
and the foil covers. The AccuFoil covers are really nice because those have some dimension to them. The way we did that, you start with a piece of foil paper, and then I had to select what are the foreground elements and what are the background elements. And you'd go into Photoshop and you'd create a complex mask, telling the printer, this is a foreground object. And so then they would print white on the foil, and then they would print the CMYK on top of that. And then for the background, they didn't print white. They just printed this CMYK on top of the foil. And so the background stuff falls to the back, and the stuff with white under it pops to the foreground. So I really like the dimensionality of the foil covers. I think they turned out really nice. But yeah, other than that, like, the Omnibus is going to stomp the soft covers.
It's the thing that really stood out to me. Well, not the thing, but I loved it initially. I backed it, and I was like, all right, when it comes, it comes. Like, you were great about sending updates, but I was like, it'll come. Like, I got other, so I wasn't paying attention to what it was going to look like. And when it arrived looking like the very first collector's case that they put out.
Oh, wow. You hadn't seen that yet.
No, like, it's like a spoiler for me. I was like, it'll come, it'll ship. I was like, what a brilliant idea. You even have the open here arrow. That was the sticker that was originally, which then I thought, oh wait, do you open it there?
You do.
Yeah, you really do.
So actually, on the design of the clamshell case, it was in a slightly different location. So I had to modify that to make sure that it was right where the magnetic case opened up. But shout out to Brian Sauer on that. He did the original. Yeah, he did the original design work on that. I'm not sure who had that idea. I think I had that idea because I had wanted the collector case to be the front of the slip case since day one, but I was never able to get good source material for it. There was one collector that let me know he had it, but would never give it to me. I'm like, you're such an ass. And then finally somebody else came along. That's a cool collector.
Yeah.
And Justin Talton. And I remember everybody that's given me everything. You know what I mean? You never forget somebody that helped you achieve your goals. And so Justin Talton came along, and he had a chrome of that collector case. And I was like, okay, so this is our front, but I don't just want to put that on the front of a book. I want to recreate the collector case. And so Brian Sauer just did a bang up job on it.
No, it's phenomenal design. And in the back, you see that if you ordered I guess it's the Blu-ray set of it.
Yeah.
It comes in the waist belt that held 3 Joes.
Pocket Patrol. That's right. So, okay. I'm not going to remember his name right now, but the Pocket Patrol idea is credited inside the book. So if you go to page 1 of the book, I want to say it's Robert Vantine or something of that nature. Anyway, he's credited on the inside of the book because he's the one that gave me the Pocket Patrol idea. So I remember not only who gives me assets, but also who gives me good ideas.
It's such a good idea. In fact, I was like, okay, I think I needed, or I'm not one for throwing in, I like the physicality of a book, I'm like digital. I'm like, it's pictures on the web. But then I'm like, God dang it. That's a really great idea.
And the interviews are awesome. I just finished.
So tell me what's on those. There's videos.
The Digipack.
Yeah.
The Digipack's totally different than the book. So in the making of the book, I recorded 40 hours of new interviews. Now, this was during COVID, and I'm a video professional. And so I had a bunch of shoots lined up for spring and summer of 2020. And right when COVID came around, all of my corporate clients canceled their shoots because corporate policy was now, okay, nobody's getting together in person until we figure out this pandemic. And so I had all this video equipment just sitting around, and I was sitting at my house working a lot, but missing people and wanting to get out and shoot and stuff. And so I knew I was working. Chad and I had already started working on the Omnibus immediately when we finished the soft covers.
And you're talking about Chad. Is it pronounced Huckle? Huckle. Chad Huckle.
Yep. Yeah. Don't make me. Oh man, that's like Larry Hama. Huckle. I think it's just Huckle. It's like Huckleberry. Pretty sure it's Huckle. Anyway. A lot of people call him
Sorry,
Who Call though.
sorry,
I've
Chad.
heard his name in a lot of videos where people are calling him Chad Who Call. So
Nice.
anyway, Chad and I started working on this right after the soft covers got done, and it became apparent that they were going to sell out. But we had gotten to another level with volumes like 3, 4, 5, 6. So we were no longer happy with 1 and 2. So the low hanging fruit was we're going to reshoot, rescan, and re edit everything
Hmm.
from 1982 to 1985. And we ended up doing 86 as well. So we worked on that from 2018, 2019, 2020, maybe. And then when COVID came around, I had already scheduled all these shoots to go around and film with people to get new interviews, to get new content for the book, right? Because I have to have some research in there to make it like a valid kind of, resource, not
Hmm.
just a picture book. And so I went around and shot with all these guys, and we shot 40 hours. And it was just basically, I'm going to film these because I have this video equipment sitting around, and I've done audio interviews with them before, and that's what's peppered throughout 3D Joe's on different product pages. You'll find different creator commentary audio bits, and those are cool. I started working on those back in 2013, but I wanted to step it up and do video for this one. So anyway, the Digipack will have hours and hours of interviews with Kirk Bazigian, marketing, Vinny DeLevia, marketing, Ed Morrill, packaging, Ron Rudat and Mark Pennington, figure design. There's a couple, Bill Merkline, sculpture. There's a couple others. We've got 8 of them. I'm not going to remember everybody right
That's
now.
oh no, that's awesome. Well,
So
the other great thing you do in the front, I snapped a couple of pics because it's also, listeners, if you're not familiar with the actual finished product, I'm sure you're familiar with 3D Joe's, which is one of the if not the top premier website for researching GI Joe stuff. I do think you've leapt over yojo.com.
well, I'll put a qualifier
And
in there.
yojo.com is tremendous, don't get me wrong.
Yes, it absolutely is. And my friends that spent many, many years working on Yojo, nothing but the utmost respect
100%.
for, the Patrick Stewarts, the Philip Donnellys, the Terry Dizzards,
Yep.
everybody that touched that and gave years of their life to that. I've always said I'm like standing on the shoulders of giants with 3D Joe's, but I will put in a qualifier there. Yojo is still more comprehensive than 3D Joe's aspires than than 3D Joe's aspires to be. What 3D Joe's aspires to be is the best 1982 to 1994 domestic U.S. resource, and I do think in that category we've succeeded. Vintage3djoes.com documents 1964 to 1976, and 3dsuperjoe.com documents 1977-78, the
Right.
Super Joe line,
Which
and those are both comprehensive as well.
Yeah.
So from 1964 to 1995, we've comprehensively documented the brand, but that's where we stop. And so Yojo is a better resource for everything 97 to about 2018, when they were unfortunately bought out by Vertical Scope.
Yeah.
And then the development stopped.
Yeah, I don't really know. I don't know the details there.
The quick summation
yeah.
is the 3 guys that started Yojo were passionate fans like
Mm-hmm.
me, but eventually, for some reason, the 3 of them decided to sell, and so they sold it to this guy Jim. And Jim had a few other action figure websites. I believe he owned figures.com, and he had this dream of just owning all the action figure websites, and so he was building towards that. So Jim bought the website, and then he kept it for several years, and he tried to monetize it in different ways. Number one, they put a bunch of ads on it. You've seen Yojo, it's got a ton of ads on it. Number 2, they created the collector resource where you would pay a subscription and you could put the checks in the boxes and document your collection and track. It was a tracking tool, which is cool. And I don't begrudge anybody trying to make money off their website,
Sure.
That's why I started doing the posters, was to help pay for the website. And then eventually that ended up being the books. So like, I'm not begrudging anybody for trying to monetize something they've worked hard to build, but Jim got greedy, and Jim didn't love G.I. Joe. Jim loved money.
Okay.
And so eventually, unfortunately, the people that do love G.I. Joe, the admins and the contributors, they did not have the ownership. And so when Jim decided to sell, he sold it to this company out of Canada called Vertical Scope that just buys up communities like message boards and websites. And they're just a traffic farm for pushing ads. And so they own Yojo. Eventually the admins and contributors lost access, and it's just basically frozen in time. So
That's yeah.
that's why you don't see documentation past 2018, 2019. I think it was 2018, the last year the G.I. Joe Collectors Club had the rights to the brand, and they were still creating figures, because if you remember Toys R Us, we weren't even getting new Joes at Toys R Us
Right.
back in 2018.
Right.
So I think they got halfway through documenting the club stuff for 2018, and then it was cut off.
That's really too bad. And yes, 100% props to the guys that made it. I think because it's frozen in time, that's why as time goes by, it just becomes it's harder and harder
More
to
rusty.
see. Yeah, no one's checking broken links. No one's,
And they're not going to be able to fix errors either,
Right.
because archiving is a fluid thing. And
Yep.
and I'm still checking in with those guys and Mark Belomo. And so when I make a change to something, like what year I think a certain product actually came out, which I talk about in the book for one little chapter, one little article, they're not going to be able to edit Yo Joe,
Right.
and that sucks.
Right.
Because it would be nice to have a consensus, like all the major resources saying the same thing, but
Well,
it's just not going to happen.
that I think that leaves a void for 3D Joes to slide right in.
Yeah, and I try to share with the community, like if I do make a change, like Sonic Fighters are 91 and Supersonic Fighters are 92, and the Desert Apache, although it came out late in 91, we're putting it squarely in 91 because it was intended to go with Sonic Fighters, and the Ford America is 92 because it was intended to go with Supersonic Fighters. When we're making a judgment call like that,
Yeah.
I try to put it out in front of the community and let them know what the rationale is. I mean, they had the fridge as 87. Or excuse me, they had the fridge as 86 and Sergeant Slaughter is 85. The mint on card backs for 1985, you won't find a Sergeant Slaughter offer on one of those. You will only find it on 86. It was a spring of 86 offer.
Yeah.
And then the fridge was a spring of 87 offer. You won't find 86 card backs, that have Claymore at the top left, on the cross sell on the back. You won't find an 86 card back
Right.
with an 87 fridge offer. You might find an 86 figure on an 87 card back with the fridge offer, but that doesn't mean that the fridge came out in 86. That means that 86 figure was also sold in 87 with the fridge promo. So I get in the weeds, man.
I love it. First of all this hot Chicago Bears talk. I absolutely love it. But that is the level of detail that I think shows through this whole thing. And it also illustrates how fluid the entire process is. I was telling you separately that, like, I spent 2 hours. I barely got through 1982. And you see just some of the insights of, in real time, these are real decisions being made by real people. So they put something into production and someone comes up with a better idea, and hey, what if we change this font, or what if we rearrange this? Or what was fascinating to me was the actually the box sizes for the original toys, how they were too large, and the reason they shrunk them is because it was illegal. It was like considered deceptive salesmanship, because here's a giant
deceptive packaging.
Yeah, here's a giant box with a jump jetpack in it,
There was a federal law against that.
Yeah.
And I don't think that the feds came after Hasbro. I think one of the Hasbro lawyers was like, you can't do this, man. That box is just way too big for that product.
And I think you made the observation in the book that, like, it was the right move, because then you saved on shipping. You shipped a lot more product at them, and you're saving on shelf space,
Exactly. Your square footage, you can make more money per square foot for the shelf space that you're allocated.
Completely.
So it was a win.
In cases like that, I am assuming the larger boxes go for more money in the aftermarket now, right?
Well, it only depends which ones were out for longer. And I'm not sure on those boxes. I haven't tried to collect both versions of all three I think it was 3 of them that were affected. I do know, like, the Zartan situation where they changed it from paranoid schizophrenic to deleting that off of his file card.
Right.
I do know that the Zartan one is harder to find the second version. I don't know with the shrinkage situation in 82, which one of those is harder to find. So I'm not going to make up an answer.
No. I appreciate it. Yeah. But you can actually, so we were talking about Kickstarter and all that stuff. You can just go and you can purchase this today.
Oh yeah. So 3djoes.com/art. That's the shortest URL.
Perfect. Yeah. And you can,
so the update for right now is I've sold through the first 4,000 were delivered in 4 cargo containers. I got a ship with cargo containers full of books.
Listeners,
so
they're 18 pounds a piece.
Right. And so, and they're they're just big boxes.
Yeah.
And so like per pallet, like you know how big a pallet is,
Yeah.
you can only fit 28 book sets on a pallet.
Why?
So
Wild.
there's like 330 pallets or something coming my way. So we got delivery of the first 4 cargo containers. That was 4,000 books, and we shipped those out in 4 days. I'm working with an amazing fulfillment company out in New Jersey. And so then we were just waiting on the second half of the shipment, which is actually 4,400 books,
Hmm.
because they did something called overrun where I got an extra 400 books that I had to pay
Yep.
for. So the 4,400 just arrived at the port on the 7th, which was 3 days ago, and the books are in transit to Jersey to start doing fulfillment of the pre-orders that are kind of in back order right now.
Awesome.
So
That's great. So, if this sounds enticing to you, it is the most comprehensive, high quality, high definition collection of the artwork, and not just the card art. It's all the promotional stuff, the lunch boxes, the thermoses, the toys, the Band-Aid kits,
yeah.
the Halloween costumes, you name it. The birthday cake napkins, like you name it. If it had a license and it had an image attached to it, Carson has dug up that image, which was another fascinating thing. Again, this is all from the first year that I'm reading from your book that I'm learning about this.
Right.
Is so much of the stuff that you're getting are from the licensors, not from Hasbro themselves, because the licensors still had, I believe it's called the Kodachrome.
That's right.
Yeah.
So Hasbro would duplicate and release via a licensing folder Kodak prints. More often than not, what you're going to find are Kodak prints, but that's a photo print, which can be scanned and scaled up without loss of resolution much better than something that's been printed, through an offset lithograph process where you've got the kind of dot to dot dot pixelization kind of thing when you zoom in. The licensees would receive this licensing packet that would usually have Kodak prints that were showing the upcoming product for the next year, right? And they wanted these people to make licensed product using that artwork on their product. Now, sometimes they would be sent Kodachromes, which are the high resolution transparencies, these clear transparencies that you can put on a light table. And so the number one asset that I could get my hands on is the original paintings. And I've been lucky enough to scan several of those. The number two asset would be those Kodachromes, because you can scan those at 2400 DPI. And I don't want to get too in the weeds, but printing only requires about 300 DPI for it to look phenomenal. So if you scan something at 2400 DPI, you can scale that up 8 times the size of the physical chrome itself without a loss of quality.
Great.
So there's things like, okay, so the number one's the paintings, number two's the Kodachromes, number 3 would be those Kodak photo prints, and then number 4 would be anything that's been printed that I then scan. But you can't scale that up too much without starting to see the printing artifacting. So I've gotten very, very lucky to be able to scan several paintings. I'd say probably 10 original paintings.
Any notable ones in there? Like any, like the Snake Eyes with
Torpedo,
Timber.
Torpedo.
It's great.
The Vamp.
Wow.
Both of the Tyco kits, like the trucking set, the train set.
I love that set. Every time I see it somewhere for sale, my brain goes, "You need to buy this." And then you
should frame that print. You got your print set.
That's right? The other thing is, and I believe that was just for Kickstarter backers, right?
No. Every set has that. So basically, what the Kickstarter backers did was supported this project beyond my wildest expectations. And so what I ended up doing was just growing and growing and growing the final deliverable. I made the book bigger dimensionally, the dimensions of it. I made the book bigger by adding, I think our initial goal was 480 pages. We ended at 712.
Jesus.
We just added a tremendous amount of content to that. We ended up going with 11 double gatefold spreads. And the initial goal wasn't that many. Like, we just scaled it up in every way we could. We were originally going to do 2 discs, like just 2 DVDs in the book. And then people were like, well, can we do Blu-ray? I don't have a DVD. I'm like, really? Don't Blu-ray players play DVDs?
Blu-ray players do play DVDs.
It's
and everyone
not
who says
it's backward compatible.
Yeah, everyone who says,
compatible.
I don't have a disc player, they turn around and they ignore their PlayStation or their Xbox sitting right there. They both play discs.
Right, exactly. Those are players too. So anyway, and I shot all these interviews in HD. Obviously, it's not 1997, so I shot all these in HD. So the digipack, I ended up deciding that I was going to release 2 DVDs and 2 Blu-rays to try to be all things to all people. Now, what I've ended up with is way more content than I can fit on one of those. If I have to pick one or the other, I might be able to fit all of the interviews that I've polished as opposed to having to trim them down and condense them further. So what I did during Kickstarter, which was amazing, and I learned this early on in making products for the community, is engage with the community to ask them their opinion, give them a couple options, and let them tell you what they want. Don't try to predict what I'm doing air quotes, but customers might want.
Right.
Talk to them. Put things in front of them and let them help you decide. That's always worked really well for me. So what I did on the Kickstarter was created this pledge level called Collaborative Backers. And those people have done many polls for me throughout the creation of this book to decide between a couple options. And so I think the next option I'm going to put in front of them is, hey guys, what if we eliminate that antiquated DVD format and we just do 4 Blu-rays? So like, it's just another free upgrade. This is going to cost me more money, but what it does is I'm going to speak off the cuff here, and I think these numbers are right. But a DVD-5, just a normal DVD, will only give me 130 minutes of content.
Yeah.
So if I do 2 DVD-5s, that's only 260 minutes of content. I've got that from one interview with Vinny DeLevia,
Wow.
right?
Yeah.
So the Blu-rays that I think are the 10 gigabyte Blu-rays, those will allow me to have, I believe, close to double that, like 260 minutes. And I get that each per disc, right?
Yeah. Plus,
so
two of those, the image quality is going to be much better.
Oh, yeah. Then it's HD. So if I do 4 Blu-rays instead of 2 SD DVDs and 2 Blu-ray DVDs, I literally think you go 260 times 4. So we're talking 1,000 minutes worth of content instead of 260 that is the physical limitation of the DVDs. So I'm going to put that in front of the backers, because I've already done the editing for, I just completed the 6th. I'm just starting on the 7th, which is Mark Pennington, and the 8th is Bill Merkline. And I want you guys to have the director's cut. I don't want to have to condense this stuff down way further just to fit the physical media that I had initially thought that I would do.
Don't leave anything on the table. If you're going to do it, especially this version of it, this is the culmination of this stuff. Maybe down the road you get a bit different idea of the way to go even further, but this is going to have a long shelf life in a lot of people's homes. So absolutely go. My vote is go for all of it. Any big idea you have,
as much as I can on there.
Take the time and do it right, so that you don't have any regrets about how you executed it. Because you're doing great with it so far. That's how I feel about
the book.
Yeah,
I appreciate it.
Oh,
and that's
real quick, we lost the thread real quick. Basically, the books come with 6, 12, 24.
Yeah.
What are they? Like 20 by 10 prints?
They're 11 by 14, and the reason I chose that is you can get really cheap 11 by 14 frames.
Yes, and they're awesome. They're really good looking, and they're a nice variety of things from all the way from that. What is it? Is it called the Stars and Stripes Forever? That the one that you guys.
That's Ron Rudat's painting from 1982.
Gorgeous.
Stars and Stripes Forever.
Gorgeous.
And then you get To the Rescue, which is the other poster that was sold in 1982.
Awesome.
So we did a backer's choice, which again goes back to what I was talking about, having the Kickstarter backers weigh in on what they want this thing to be. So I enabled the backers to vote and select their top 12 prints, and then there was a lot of stuff left on the cutting room floor that I really thought it was necessary to include, more stuff from Doug Hart, because he was a huge contributor to the brand from 1987 to 1994. There were other artists that were involved in G.I. Joe that are well known as artists, but lesser known as G.I. Joe artists, like Earl Norm.
I just pulled that up. Earl Norm's accessory pack is
beautiful.
Most people know Earl Norm, I think, from Masters of the Universe, I would say, right?
Right. That's right. Yeah.
This is gorgeous. I don't know that I've ever seen this before, because I think I only had one of the early accessory packs or something.
Yep.
This is really beautiful, and it's the He-Man style art. And I'm like, I'm all for that.
It is.
Yeah.
And I was really lucky that
Road Pig looks like a pig, by the way. He gives Road Pig dolls.
He ain't pretty. And I think he also did the card art for Road Pig. If you look, it's pretty consistent. And
Oh, nice.
Earl Norem, I believe Earl Norem also did the Voltar card art for that year. And this is talked about in the book. But basically, Ed Morrill was the guy in charge of packaging from 1970 when they started the adventure team all the way through to 1989. He was hired in 69. So it's a 20-year run where he was a packaging contractor with an agency out of Manhattan, and he hired Don Stivers to do all the artwork for the adventure team in the 70s, and then he hired Hector Garrido in 81 to do all the packaging artwork for A Real American Hero when they launched again in 82. And so Ed Morrill was the man, but Hasbro was looking at cutting costs because in the late 80s, the belt was starting to tighten.
Yeah.
They peaked in terms of sales, they peaked in 86, and then it started kind of a slow decline to 1990 where it was selling less than half of what it sold in 86. So they had to tighten the belt and make some cuts. And also at the same time, simultaneously, the Hasbro internal folks were staffing up a little bit and getting better, getting stronger at their skills. And they wanted to basically bring packaging in house. And this is similar across different departments. Like Hasbro didn't have their own internal licensing people in the early 1980s. So they let Marvel do that. So Nel Yomtov is the guy that I interviewed from Marvel, who was the guy in charge of licensing for G.I. Joe Real American Hero for the first few years. And then Hasbro decided to bring that in house and build their own licensing department and take that over 1984, 1985 ish. So this is a normal thing that happens. A company uses an external vendor for a
Hmm.
while and then they
Yeah.
decide they're going to save some money and they bring it in house and they hire a couple people.
Hmm.
So anyway, that transitional period in the late 80s is when Hasbro used a few other contract artists like Earl Norem to do packaging. So the accessory pack you mentioned, I was able to get the Kodachrome of that.
Ooh.
And so when you go to the 1988 section, you'll see a close up from that Kodachrome that's just the Joes that are on the mountainside. And
Oh,
that Kodachrome was scanned such high resolution, like again 2400 DPI,
yeah.
so you could blow it up 8 times the size of that Chrome, and that was a sizable Chrome. That was like an 8.5 by 11 Chrome, so you can get the resolution to print just a small portion of that image, which was the Joes on the mountainside,
Uh-huh.
on a full size page, which the book is 13.5 by 14.5, and it looks pristine.
That's
There's
great.
no loss.
That's
There's no
great.
loss there. So the only way you could do that is have access to the original painting or have access to the Kodachromes. I don't think I would have been able to scan a Kodak print, and I certainly wouldn't have been able to scan anything that had been printed with that artwork
Hmm.
and blow it up that much without, seeing the
Hmm.
pixelization.
Yeah, it really makes a difference, listeners. So if you're at all on the fence about this stuff, I want you to put it in perspective this way. And no shade to them over at Super 7. I absolutely have loved their figures they put out. But the recent backer kit of the Cobra ship, I think a lot of people online were agreeing that it was just way too overpriced, right? Just
It was
too
a lot of
it
money.
was a lot of money. It was a lot of money. And it was a great product, but it was just a lot of money. The flip side of that is the three Art of G.I. Joe Real American Hero Omnibus Hardcover, where it is a reasonable $150 for all this stuff we're talking about. And I mean that not in any salesman go out and buy it way, but it is literally the antithesis of that Cobra mothership, man. This is an absolute reasonable cost, and you're getting everything that if you're listening, I mean, shit, if you're listening to this podcast and your last name is not Slepsky, you're here because you love GI Joe. So this is so worth it. You got birthdays coming up. Ask your wife, ask your partner, ask your mom, ask your dad. Get this book. It is awesome. And then make sure you carve out a sitting room for space because it's also
You're going to
huge.
need a
You're gonna
tabletop.
need a tabletop, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's great. And I really can't say enough about it. It is such a value for 150. So go to 3djoes.com/art and get your copy. Get your copy today.
I appreciate it, man. And I'll say the best testament that I've heard is from several backers who have got it and flipped through it, that they think I undercharged for it,
Yeah.
or that they would have paid double. Like
Yes.
when people get this in hand, they don't question the value. You know what I mean? The fact that I charged 150 for it, they are happy to have paid that because it's 20 pounds worth of
Yeah.
artwork. It's a comprehensive look at every single piece of painted artwork from 1982 to 1995. And I say 1995 because there's actually several canceled or unreleased paintings that are
Mm-hmm.
shown in the very last section in the book. So you're never going to have, and I'll say that, you will never have a more comprehensive look at the painted artwork of G.I. Joe: A Real American Hero.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen. I pitched this book to Hasbro 4 years ago after I'd already done the soft covers and I knew I wanted to do the omnibus hardcover.
Mm-hmm.
I went to Hasbro and pitched it to them, and they didn't tell me to stop doing what I was doing, but they weren't willing to license it at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And they were skeptical that the audience would want something of this size. Publishers don't they don't play with this size.
Yeah.
13 and a half by 14 and a half at 712 pages.
Mm-hmm.
I tried to get it published here in North America, and I talked to several companies in Canada and the United States, and they could print it, they couldn't bind it. Like, this is a big it's all,
if anyone's
it's
familiar
all
with
hands.
if anyone's familiar with Taschen,
Mhm.
that's a really high-end book manufacturer. They do very expensive books. A lot of they've been getting into a lot of genre stuff. So there's a lot of comic book stuff, but they do very large format books. There's a shop out here at the mall, the Grove by me out here, so you can go in there. You can flip through a lot of these books that are way too expensive
Nice.
for me. Yeah.
Yeah.
But there is no doubt that the quality of those Taschen books is, you see the high price tag, but you go, oh wow, this is worthwhile to not just read and flip in the corner. This is a book that'll live in my home. This omnibus is absolutely that level of production.
I appreciate it. We spent every nickel that we raised, and we spent hundreds of thousands more, and I'm not exaggerating.
Yeah.
The total expenses for the book so far, $688,000.
Boom.
I have to do reporting to Hasbro, right, as part of the licensing deal,
Mhm.
and so that's why I just totaled it up at the end of the year. And I want to be honest with myself and make sure I'm not putting myself into bankruptcy. But so the total, actually, I'll flip over to my spreadsheet.
Well,
Let me
while
just
you
get
flip
this-
there, I'll share this. Not to
Here.
sound like an out of touch Charlie, but I backed it, and like I said, I was like, of course I'm going to get this as soon as I heard about it, and then I moved
Yep.
on, and I never really went back and looked what I paid for it. When this arrived last week, in my head I go, well, I must have paid $250 for this, and it's worth every penny. When we're on the
Nice.
call right now and I see that it's 150, my brain broke about 10 minutes ago, and I went, holy crap, it's really only $150? Yeah.
And the Kickstarter backers got it for $100.
Well, then I only paid $100 for it.
Yeah.
Let me put it that way.
I mean, unless you bought that collaborative level, where you were involved in all the decision making, that was the $150 level. So I think I had like maybe 600 people do the collaborative level, and the other, whatever it was, 2,000 or something, they got it for 100. And then they were buying add-on books for 90. So I'm going to tell you, Joe, I don't make a profit on that. Right? There's no profit built into that because I spent and I grew the book so much.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't worried about making a profit on the $90 add-ons.
Mm-hmm.
I was just wanting to make the best possible book I could. Wow. And so, the total expenses right now are $688,195, and then the total sales as of January 1st are $594,350. So I'm still 90 in the hole. I don't care because I've got several thousand left to sell. And so as those sell, I'm going to make that money back. It's just a question of how long that takes. And I said all along, my mission was to collect, document, and preserve this artwork and make it accessible in a physical form, and to keep it accessible. Mm-hmm. Because what we went through with the soft covers, we made 1,000 of those and they sold out in like a year. And so for 3D Joe's, I didn't have anything to sell. There was $5 posters, and that's not paying for anything. Mm-hmm. But I didn't have books from 2019 until we put this Kickstarter out in the spring of 2022. And so there was really like a lack of being able to pay for the website or make any real money. And so then I put up the Kickstarter, and man, I don't know if it was the combination of the books were not available for a while. And when you tell people they can't have something, that makes them want it more. Oh, so the soft covers, they were out of print for a few years, right? 2019 to 2022. And then Classified hit, and a lot of new people came to G.I. Joe. Yeah. And so people were hot for this thing. So when I put out the Kickstarter for the Omnibus, man, we blew through the goal on day one. My first goal, all of my stretch goals, we blew all of it on day one.
Love it.
It was just amazing.
I love it.
So everybody that got behind me enabled me and Chad to make this book as amazing as it is. So I
That's
think every single backer that,
well.
you know,
Let's real quick. If there's any like on the creative side, if there's anyone you want to shout out, and don't worry about forgetting anybody. We know
yeah,
they're certainly sourcing the book, but there's a lot of people that helped you
yeah,
collaborate on this. So please.
yeah. I'll say from the creative side, I'm only going to name three people because those are the three people that did the most work on it. But it's me and Chad by far. All the heavy lifting, laying out all 712 pages, restoring every single image. I wrote 75,000 words for the book based on the interviews. So I basically got my doctoral thesis on the Art of G.I. Joe, a Real American Hero. But that's based on the 40 hours worth of new interviews that I'd filmed, in addition to the old interviews I'd done. And it was just such a pleasure to really immerse myself in this for about a straight year and a half, man. This
Yeah.
was a near full-time job for me for about a year and a half. And Chad, man, he's got his own day job. I've got my own day job too, but I'm able to push mine off onto freelancers more. And so I made that less of a priority for myself. And I made this book really top priority. And then Brian Sauer, indispensable design expertise. He created the clamshell case. That's the exterior and the interior. All those figure drawings are
Mm-hmm.
meticulous, and he created
It's
those
gorgeous.
over quite an expansive time. That took him quite a bit of time to do the interior of the clamshell case. When we first got rolling with the Kickstarter, we presented different options for how we would present the action figure pages and the vehicle pages, and we gave the backers some options, and they helped us vote. All that stuff was Brian bringing options to the table, and then once we had kind of everything set, then I became the production artist that like laid out all the pages. So it's really the three of us, but beyond that there are dozens of contributors and they're all listed on that first page of the
Mm-hmm.
book. So I don't want to say
Oh,
any names and
I
leave
hear you.
anybody out, but I made sure that their names are all there on page one, because there have been people that have been right here beside me shoulder to shoulder, since 2012 when I started 3D Joe's. And there's people that have joined me, like joined the fight more recently, and I'm working with them all the time. So Philip Donnelly just gave me a really cool VHS rip
Philip's great.
of two.
I love
You
Philip.
saw
Yeah,
that
yeah,
already?
yeah. I haven't seen the VHS rip, but
Oh,
Philip's a
okay.
great guy.
It's
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Kid Stuff. Kid Stuff did two illustrated books,
Oh, did
and
they?
Philip found a VHS that is a VHS version of these books that
Wow.
you can watch.
Oh,
And the
wow.
cameraman, it's like the cameraman had the art, and so he'd start with a wide shot and then zoom in, and then he'd pan across the art. So it feels like animated almost, but it's really just like glass bottom boat, pan and scan,
Yeah,
Ken
yeah.
Burns effect kind of stuff. But it's a really cool little video, and like he just gave that to me, and I put that up on 3D Joe's and threw it up on the YouTube last night. There's just people that are contributing all the time,
That's great.
you know,
Well, it is.
and
It
and I
is a
just
village.
yeah, I can't say enough about all those guys, but I don't want to try to name them all.
No, it's great. That's great. So yeah, that's an amazing project. And then let's real quick, because you've been generous with your time today. You've also
Sure.
got an amazing project that's also working on called Operation Recall.
That's
Which
that's been the other
yeah,
big lift for me
I'm a
over the
background
last two
that
years.
too.
Yep.
I think I got one of like the 4-pack backs.
Hmm.
It is such a great idea. You've reached, if I get anything wrong here, let me know. You reached out to some of the original actual designers of the
Hmm.
line and
Hmm.
said, "Hey, let's do new figures today." You've then also included fans have submitted. I think
Yeah.
our friend Jason Murrell's son, I think
Yep. Alex.
yeah,
Yep.
Yeah. Um,
That's right.
and they've designed what essentially would be it's called Operation Recall, but it's Joe's for today, and you're putting
It's a
them,
whole year. It's a whole year's worth of product
yeah,
basically. Because
and,
you
and you're
remember in
putting
the
out
glory years.
actual full figures.
Yep.
Not we're not talking artwork anymore. We're talking about actual action
Right.
figures on backer cards with accessories,
Right.
O-ring.
Yep.
It's really impressive,
Yep.
and I
So
can't
so
wait to
this
see the finished
grew.
product.
I appreciate it. This grew really, actually, that dining room table right there
Uh
is
huh.
nothing but Operation Recall accessories. The whole table is covered with accessory prototypes. I wish you were here because I could just
Oh
show you
man,
around the house. My whole house is just
I
crazy.
love it.
But
I love
anyway,
it.
that's a side story. So this grew organically out of the book. I was going to do one chapter of the Art of G.I. Joe: A Real American Hero where I documented the creation of one all new action figure.
Hmm.
And so I asked Kirk and Ron, and Doug Hart was going to be the illustrator, Ed Morrill, the packaging guy that would do the thumbnail sketches. Larry if he would write the file card. I basically asked them all like, hey, would you guys be willing to like make one more figure? And so we went through that process, and I thought this was not going to be a toy. We weren't actually going to make it. I was just going to document the process. And so we went through that process, and it was so fun. And we did, go through the sculpting process too. So we did have a physical product, and we went through 3D modeling and 3D printing for all the accessories. So we did have a physical product, and it turned out great. And I was like, this needs to exist. Like, people need to be able to have this in their collections. So I went to the Kickstarter community once again, and I said, hey, look, I paid these guys out of pocket. I thought it was going to be a chapter in a book, but now I want it to be a toy line. Can you help me do this again and again and again? And basically the level of funding that we get will dictate the number of figures that we produce. And the community just went bananas on it. We raised like $413,000, and we met every goal that we set, just barely. Like, in the last day, we unlocked. Actually, we had one or two figures that weren't unlocked at the end of the campaign, and I continued it through Backer Kit. And through Backer Kit, we unlocked the last two figures. So we unlocked every goal that we set out to do. And I've been steadily working with these guys ever since. I've got a giant Excel Gantt chart that shows everybody that's doing every part of the project. It's like my little heat map. So Doug Hart he's completed 4 of the paintings. He's got 3 more that are almost done. Bill Merkline is working on his very last figure sculpt. Mike Good is working on his last 2 figure sculpts. So we got 3 figures left to sculpt out of 18. The file cards are all done. What else is there to do? I've got to make the resin copies of the figures and then get the paint masters done. So that's still ahead of us. But yeah, we're rounding the bend on that project, and it's been, oh yeah. And then I should give shout out to Mark Jerwig, Mark 2 Toys. He just finished all of the accessory design. So I'm going through and doing like prototype printing for all those right now. And that's why my whole dining room table is filled with accessories. But it's just been amazing. Like, I never dreamed that I would be part of a toy line. And that's just something that, grew organically out of forming these friendships and having this big idea of, okay, there's all these guys that made our childhood so amazing. And for the most part, they're dormant. They're certainly not doing toy design anymore. So why not? Like, if there's all these other people making all these small kind of niche toy lines, what's stopping us? And there's really nothing stopping us. Like, we've got access to the factories, we've got the funding, we've got the talent. Let's do it.
And I gotta say, and it makes sense because it literally is the guys who did it. They vibe right in with the Joes that we all know and love. The designs that I've seen, the designs of these guys that I've seen, it's not, it's not like a gritty reimagining for the new millennium. Not at all. So when you said your first guy, is that the Rotolo? Is that the guy? Because I've seen him in most of your artwork. Yeah. What a great design. A dude basically using a drone to, and he has a real bird, or is that a drone bird?
He's got a carrier pigeon.
Oh, I don't listen, Carson, I don't know how much you listen to the show, but whenever I get a chance, I make it well known. I am here for the animals. I am here for the G.I. Joe animal companions.
You're going to love it.
I love them. They're great. Yep. So yeah, you got a carrier pigeon.
We've got like 5 animals and like 2 robotic animals, right? We've got a pack dog, which is like a robotic dog, like a Boston Dynamics kind of dog.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That comes with his technician. We've got obviously a drone that comes with her Tello. We've got 2 or 3 dogs. We've got a cheetah. We got a Galapagos tortoise, man. We've got some crazy ideas.
Isn't the tortoise like a bomb sniffer or bomb?
Well, his name is Tank, and so he's really heavily armed. This dude, I've actually got him printed up. So the tortoise himself was sculpted by Bill Merkline, and then he's got this armored shell that goes over him that also holds all these missiles, and then he's got a spring-loaded launcher that sits on top. It's going to be the one spring-loaded launcher of the line.
Man.
And so his name is Tank. And then the guy that he comes with, Clanker, is basically like a jetpack trooper.
Yeah.
And he's got a real world smart grenade launcher that the military used for a while. They've now kind of outlawed it because explosive projectiles under a certain weight are against the Geneva Convention.
Okay.
It's an in-depth crazy story. But anyway,
all this I completely blanked. Yeah, I have your Operation Recall trading cards or playing cards. So I
Yep.
think that's where I saw the turtle before. Yeah.
Yeah, he's awesome. He's awesome. So,
But they do.
what I'll
They
do
look.
for
They look like they would be in the line of a show, like the Snakeheads by Pennington.
Mhm.
That's
Yep.
absolutely the next generation of the eels,
Hydro.
of the Hydro
Yeah,
Vipers.
or the
Yes,
Hydro
yeah,
Viper.
Hydro Viper.
You know,
Yes.
Mark Pennington did the Hydro Viper in '88, and I very much see Snakeheads as like the next in his line of aquatic Cobra troops. So I think my goal for this was to make action figures, like to let them pick up where they left off. Mark left the brand in '89. Ron got off GI Joe in '86. Many of the '87 figures were his designs, and then Mark finished them. But those guys were both done at '89. So I wanted it to feel like, what if, one of those Marvel Comics what if scenarios.
Yeah.
What if Mark Pennington and Ron Rudak came back on in 1990? What would the figures be like?
Totally.
Because I didn't want them to be as simple as the figures that they did in 82, 83,
Mhm.
where they were just getting started. I wanted them to be in line with the late 80s figures, a little
Yeah.
more complex designs.
Yeah, they're really great. So, listeners, if that sounds fascinating to you at all, which it should, like I'm on the Kickstarter page, but is there a great URL, or just go to, I know it's linked to on your 3D Joes.
Go to operationrecall.com.
That's it.
Go to operationrecall.com, and then you'll see the roll call page that'll list off all the figures that are being made, and it's got a link to the backer kit. So if you want to jump in, I'm not going to close the backer kit until we have paint masters for every one of these figures. I want people to be able to see, okay, this is what it's going to look like. This is all the accessories in real form, and this is all the figures painted up so I can see what they look like. And then I want people to be able to kind of make their final selections, because people like yourself that have got the 4-pack,
Yeah.
you get to go through and pick which 4 you want.
Well, yeah,
I
I
want
picked
you to be
4,
able
and,
to-
and now I want to get all six. Is it 16? Did you say?
Well, yeah, so we're doing 4 waves of 4 figures, so
Yeah.
that's 16. But there's also 3 bonus figures.
Oh.
Rotello was the first bonus. Midnight Ops was the mid-campaign bonus. And then General Mortefero is kind of like the mail order Cobra Commander for the first year. He's the
Mhm.
big bad guy. He's a badass design. He's really great. He's intimidating. And so we've got 19 figures that
Oh,
are
wow.
being made.
It's great.
Yeah. I mean, that's when you look at the peak of GI Joe, they were doing 17 mainline figures per year for several years,
Mhm.
right? And so that's as big as I aspired to go.
And
Let's
that's
go
with,
as
and
big
that's
as
with
they did.
Hasbro doing it with an army
Right.
of
Right.
designers, artists, marketers,
Mm-hmm.
factories. This is a small team of you guys putting this together. I think.
But to be fair,
I
it's
think
going to take
dynamite.
us a lot more than 1 year to do it.
Oh, sure. Sure.
I'm calling it year 1, but it's going to take us several years to do it. But the good news is
Goals,
I'm
goals.
I'm planning the back end of it so that our version 1.5 or year 2 are not going to be so far off. So little spoiler alert.
Well, I don't want to throw any more ideas in your head, but any
Yeah.
thoughts of doing like a one-shot comic book to go with?
8 issues actually.
Doe. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. We've already. Okay, I'll say it. Spoiler alert.
Oh!
Ron Wagner's agreed to do the art. I just have to get the budget together. All right. So we're not at a point where I've got that money yet, but we will get there.
I love
Gotta
Ron
keep the
Wagner.
faith.
Love Ron
I
Wagner.
love Ron
Love his
Wagner
work.
too. And like, who better for that task?
Oh my God. One of my all-time favorites. Yeah.
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 Yeah. So we've got the script. We've
dope.
got the script written. Now the script is written by one of my good friends, and I think he's done an amazing job with it. But I'm going to partner him with a comic book editor / author and make sure it's where it needs to be
Right.
before we
Smart.
hand it off to Ron.
Smart. Yes, I've said a million times on this show, editors, when it comes to comic books, editors are so important. I mean, Larry
They
has
are.
said it a million times in his interviews. Having a good editor on an eye can really, really make the difference in a project. So very smart. That's so.
It's so much pressure on a writer. If you don't have a good editor that's really plugged in,
Yeah.
that really cares about the quality of the product, it's
Yeah.
too much pressure on the writer. Like, you need somebody that's not so close to it
Right. If
to
you
stand back, look at it objectively and say, okay, this is awesome. I love this XYZ, but
100%.
this doesn't really make sense. Or if you remember what we did here, doing this is kind of out of sync
Yep.
with that character. Or we've actually already killed that guy off, so we can't bring him back.
Yes.
Like, you know,
If
like
you're doing, so if you're writing a screenplay or if you're writing a stage play, you have read throughs. You get your friends together. You all read the
Yeah.
script together. You get notes from the people who you respect, and you kind of go to the people whose idea, whose opinions you don't really like. But you do that, and that is the job of the editor here, because a comic book writer writes in a vacuum, hands it in, it gets printed. So without that feedback of some objective eyeball to kind of rein it in, man, that's so smart.
Yeah.
Really good. I love it.
You can't blame the writer. If something big is missed, you can't blame that writer.
No.
If there wasn't an editor that was plugged in, like, it's just, they're too close to it.
Yeah.
They need someone that is just a few steps back.
Is why a lot of times you see at some of the even some of the big companies, when you have a lot of really superstar level artists or writers come in and like, I'm doing my version of something or other, and the editors don't want to exert a strong hand because that creator is like, I'm doing it this way.
They're scared of them.
Yeah, and you go, that project suffers because it's not as tight as it was when that same artist was coming up and was working hand in hand with an editor to kind of rein in their worst habits and accentuate their best qualities. It's
absolutely.
it's all of a piece.
I think there's ego involved, and
Always.
everybody wants authorship. They
Sure.
want to have that authority, and
Well, I'm excited. That's great news. You heard it here. I don't know, first, last, whenever you're hearing this. That's really exciting.
as someone that's like created video and animation stuff for clients for years and years, like, I just don't understand that mentality. I always am working with a team, and like working with the community's always helped me make these products better. I just don't understand the mentality of, well, I know how to do it and I know what's best. It's like, no, man, solicit feedback and listen to it with an open mind, and it will make your stuff better. You don't have to take everything that people tell you. I had 4 proofreaders. They disagreed on different things. If they had a consensus, I was like, okay, maybe I'm wrong on this and I should really listen to them. But if they had 2 different opinions, then I would research it and I would make my decision, but at least I solicited the feedback.
Yep. Yeah, you should always be open for notes, man. Always be open for notes, because it's, at the end of the day, it's only going to get better, because it's either going to actually tell you what you missed, or it's going to reinforce creatively, oh no, I really want it this way, because for notes are good.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
Well, Carson, it's so funny. We were originally going to do this talking about like G.I. Joe and friendship. It's you on Joe. What's your favorite thing about G.I. Joe? About 3 minutes into this conversation, my brain went, this is just all about the hardcover. So Carson,
we're gonna talk about the books and the
we're
toys.
going to talk about the books. This was awesome. Listeners, you need to go get this book, 3djoes.com/art. Get that book before it sells out, because when it sells out, I don't know if you're doing any more, but it's going to be worth it.
Here's the thing, man. I've got my spreadsheet right here. Hang on one second. I'm not just going to make up numbers, Printing was 447, and then I added 4 more signatures, so that was another 12. And then I paid for double boxing, that was another 29,000. And then I paid for the extra 404 copies. So let me total that up. 30, 40, 54, 64, 66, and then 447. I paid over $500,000 just for the print run.
Wow.
Right? I'm not going to have that money again.
Yeah, we're not doing that again.
So I'm not trying to create a FOMO situation here. I'm genuinely not. I'm always super open and honest and transparent with the community. I will not have $500,000 to spend on a book probably ever again. Right?
Yep.
So the 8,400 copies that I printed, that'll probably, I just don't see what world I'm going to be able to have another $500,000 to do a second print. I would love to, because we're already catching errors. And I would love to go back with a second print. But I mean, when I try to be honest with myself and I look at those expenses, I don't think I'm going to have $500,000 ever again to do a second print.
No.
So not to,
I'll make the FOMO. I'll make the FOMO for you. Because
there's still 3,900 copies available.
Yeah,
right.
Collectors.
So they're not going to sell out in the next couple months.
Right.
Like, if you don't have the money, don't don't break yourself trying to get a copy, but keep it in mind and do
Put
get
it
it as
on
soon as
your
you can.
put it on your Christmas list.
Put it on your wish list, your birthday list, your Christmas.
Tell your partner, exactly, because there's always
Yeah.
your partners are always like, honey, your birthday's coming, like, I want to get you something big, and they're
What do you want?
Nothing will make you happier.
And that's a good $150 price point. That's a
perfect
good
price point.
birthday or Christmas present.
And just the size of it is like it's a great gift. It feels substantial. So you're not going to see any more once they sell out. So eventually they will sell out. So get them now, get them early, and it's going to take you 4 years to get through the book anyway. So you might as well start now.
I will say the license with Hasbro does last for 4 years, and I do have a meeting with them in a couple weeks. So I have a couple other things that I would like to produce, and wish me luck on that.
You got all the luck in you. All my best wishes in the world, Carson. This is amazing. Ladies and gentlemen, Carson Mataxis, Art of 3D Joe's Omnibus Hardcover. Go get it. Operation Recall, go back it. Always great to talk to you, Carson. Always great to hear from you.
You too, Joe.
Absolutely. And now you, Joe, and Joeing is half the battle.